What's made you almost actually walk out of work? I was waiting tables at a local Mexican restaurant. One of my tables had walked out without paying their tab, and in the process of doing so, had taken the ticket showing how much they owed with him. The restaurant where I worked had a policy where any lost ticket was automatically a $25 fine. Now that these sons of bitches had walked out, I knew I was going to owe the $25, but the cost of the lunch as well. Sadly, we weren't computerized, so there wasn't a log for anywhere for how much these people had eaten, but I had a pretty good idea. The owner found me cleaning the table, frantically trying to see if the ticket was anywhere in the mess the people had left behind. He then pulled me into the bar, still in front of people, to find out what was going on. I was honest, told him what happened, and that I was willing to pay the fine and the cost of the meal out of my tips. That's when this guy started going apeshit bonkers on me. He raised his voice, started calling me a stupid bitch, and ignorant bitch, any kind of bitch he could think of. He also accused me of letting the couple walk out with the ticket as a way to screw him over, and goddamn right, I was going to pay. I was going to pay big time, especially considering what a stupid, ignorant, ugly, goddamn bitch I was. I handed him my ticket book, gave him the finger, and let him know that no job was worth this level of bullshit, and walked out the door. I was able to find another waitressing job pretty quickly, thank goodness. What I found humorous was the next day the manager, who liked me, called me at home and begged me to come back and work for them. I told him hell no. I used to teach for an inner-city high school, and have many stories about the crap I put up with there. The worst was when my mid-year evaluation came up and my administrator called me into his office. He handed me the piece of paper, which literally had a single oval around the column for zeros all the way down the page. He had been to my class one time about a month into the semester and tried to justify his ratings by saying my students were a bit loud. I then tried to defend myself by showing him the things I was working on. I had definitely been trying to improve, since it was my first year, and asking him to come back to my class to see how much I had accomplished since then. He said he would not, and also informed me that I would not be given the principal's approval for certification. In my state, you can teach without a license as long as you are working toward it, no matter how the rest of the year went. I stayed way longer than I would have anywhere else because I genuinely liked my students. The final straw was when I got back my students' grades for their standardized tests, and they were higher than all of my colleagues. I went back to him to request that he reconsider freezing me out of my certification, and he just said it was a fluke. I felt bad for my students, but never went back again. I've never been so angry in my life. This is the education crowd. Hold people back and suppress ability. I worked at Safeway when I was 16, and it was the most soul-crushing job I've ever had. I worked there for a couple months and never complained. I almost walked out mid-shift when I got yelled at for skipping my cart shift, which I didn't. I explained to them that I always bring the carts in, as it's the only time I get a reprieve from the shitty customers. I asked if the complaining was about Brian, my name is Ryan, and he said no. Kept yelling at me. Lo and behold, it turns out it was Brian whom the complaint was about, and I never got an apology, and the write-up was never revoked. I continued for a few weeks, and then informed the manager that I wasn't going to be able to work Sundays anymore, because I was entering a tutoring program and needed that day, and only that day off. He then informed me that the only reason he worked me was to work on weekends. Never mind the fact that I worked almost every weekday in addition to weekends, that I can't have that day off, and I would have to make a decision between work and school. Well, since I'm not a dumb, I picked school. I was going to finish my shift up and then give my 2 weeks, but then everything just kind of hit me. I hated the job, I hated how I was treated, I hated the way the manager expected a 16-year-old kid to pick a job at Safeway over school. I hated the customers, and I hated most of my coworkers. In my freshman year of college, I made friends with a Japanese student who always sat next to me in physics class. After some time, he started helping me with my Japanese homework, which really improved my skills. After the physics course ended, we lost touch. 2 years later, I went to Japan for a summer exchange program. After the program, I decided to take a trip to Kyoto. One day, while crossing the street, I heard someone call my name. I turned around, and there he was. We had some drinks and good food. It was great. He wasn't from Kyoto either. He was also there on a summer trip. I put the last bag of groceries in a lady's cart, told her to have a nice day, and walked out the door mid-shift. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't even take my apron off. All I did was go up to the new guy who was working carts, introduce myself, shake his hand, and tell him I'm getting the hell out of there. They still scheduled me for about 2 weeks before they got the picture. TLDR, I quit Safeway mid-shift, took a massive shit on the conveyor belt, slapped my manager, and made out with an elderly woman while we rolled around in our shit and piss. The admin at my school decided that if any students are caught with their cell phones on school property, then the school has the right to confiscate the cell phone for the rest of the school year, period. No warning, no parent conferences, no parents able to come in and get the phones back until the end of the school year. So if on the first day of school Johnny's parents are late to pick him up and Johnny takes out his phone to call them and find out where they are, then a teacher is supposed to grab the phone, give it to the admin, and the student will not get his cell phone back until June. When this policy was announced, I wanted to stand up, turn my back, and leave. I commented to a coworker that the school does not have the authority to claim rights over students' personal property, and there are many reasonable alternatives, like the parent has to come pick up the cell phone and have a meeting with the administration. This coworker was pissed at me and exclaimed something along the lines that I need to support our administration above all else. Have the parents send the monthly cell bills to the school. Or call the cops for theft of personal property. I have always had bad lungs, and I did some late night swimming one night before work the next morning. Well, that entire next day I was slowly developing bronchitis. It was my first job at a grocery store, but they were very strict. My work pace started to slow down, and I reached for my inhaler. My boss saw me taking my inhaler and began to chew me out for using drugs in front of customers. I tried to argue back, but my lungs seized up, and I lost consciousness for a few minutes. When I got back up, I had a crowd around me. My boss then told me to get back to work and finish my shift 3 hours. Everyone looked at him, and I up and left. Wow. What a fucking dickhead. Cunt deserves a clip around the ears. A client berated me in a meeting for some bonehead decision my boss had made, even though I wasn't in any way involved. This was annoying, but what made it worse is that my boss didn't say a word, even when the client moved beyond insulting my professional skill set into some personal attacks. I made it through the meeting, but I cried in the car on the way home. I can't believe I ever worked for someone who would just let me get run over like that. Late to the thread again. Here's my tale. I was about 18 and working doing residential roofing for a summer job. I had never installed clay/tile shingles before, so my boss, the owner, told me to watch one of the other guys for a few minutes to get the hang of it. No less than 2 minutes later he starts screaming, literally screaming. Guy had anger issues, asking why I was standing around and not working. So I grabbed some tiles and started shooting them down. Since I still had really no idea of what I was doing, I of course shattered the first 2 tiles I tried to shoot down. Son of a bitch comes over and starts screaming at me again for breaking tiles and proceeds to push my ass up off the roof. Granted, the fall was only about 10 feet minus 0 inches, but it still could have killed me. At this point, I was fucking fuming mad and decided I was done with that asshole. As I am packing up my gear, I can hear him cursing me to the other guys on the roof. As I am walking off of the job, I notice this dipshit is standing on one of the air hoses running from his nail gun to the air compressor on the ground. In one swift movement, I grab the air hose and yank it hard towards the ground. He comes tumbling down off of the roof and lands in a pile. As I am getting into my Jeep, I hear him threatening to call the cops on me. The foreman comes up to him and points out how foolish he would look when all of the guys on the crew clearly saw him stumble and fall off on his own. It was glorious to hear that bastard ranting and screaming at all of us as I rode off. I realized that I probably committed assault, but turnabout is fair play as far as I am concerned. I was working at a nightclub in the UK as a bartender floor boy, meeting some nights behind the bar, some walking the floor cleaning up glasses and stuff. On one of the busier nights I can remember working there, I was on the floor with two other guys, and someone straight up shit in the middle of the dance floor. And not like a couple small nuggets either, I'm talking a massive brown duck that would have made any man proud, sitting pretty on the dance floor, while everyone danced around it trying not to stare. All three of us on the floor said we'd quit if we were expected to clean it up, so a manager had to come out and do it himself. My first job was at a drugstore. It was great for about a year, but then the manager quit and the store became a total gong show. One day I show up to work and there's a new manager. I figure this is probably a good thing. Maybe the store will be a nice place to work with somebody in charge. Anyway, this new manager looks oddly familiar to me, but I can't figure out where I know her from. I shrug it off and get to work. My new boss follows. Apparently, she's also doing the wage slave work until the store finds more employees. Okay, whatever, but she doesn't know what the fuck she's doing. I had to walk her through everything she did that morning, and she still had the nerve to try to tell me what to do. For instance, when I was stocking some shelves of a popular sale item, she waddled up and asked why I wasn't sorting for expired stuff like she had told me to do. When I explained that I was refilling an empty shelf because customers kept asking for the product, she flipped shit. She accused me of being jealous of her status of manager, and that was why I was sassing her. I was 15. I had no interest in managing a shitty little drugstore. So I'm standing there, listening to her rant about how I'm a terrible employee when I notice her lip ring. I had originally thought it was a giant zit, but it was actually a flesh-colored stud right below her bottom lip. I'm staring at this piercing, fascinated by how much it looks like acne, when it suddenly clicks where I've seen this woman before. I've seen her right across the street outside of the sketchy hotel bar, standing there in a short skirt and tall boots, while creepy old men shove cash in her cleavage. As it slowly sinks in that the town hooker is trying to tell me I have issues with authority and will never hold a job, I start to question whether it's really worth the $7.50 an hour to listen to her. So I cut her off mid-sentence. "I'm going to leave now," I said. "It's not time for your break yet. You can't just go for a smoke whenever you want." "I don't smoke." "I won't be back. I'm not putting up with this." Then I cleaned out my locker and left. I got a job a week later at the drugstore up the street. No regrets. TLDR, I used to sell drugs, but quit when I figured out my new boss was a prostitute and a ditch-a-muffin. Edit for clarity. I tempied for a letting agent in 2001, and when the contract finished they actually tracked me down and offered me a full-time job. To get out of paying the agency the fee, should have got the hint then really. I was their main administrator/pa and receptionist. I always dressed well, never in jeans or anything like that, but the director did not like it. I was pulled aside and told I should dress like the rest of the girls in the office, and they ordered me a company uniform. Now, one of the reasons I did not dress like the rest of the girls in the office is because I was on the larger side at the time and was not comfortable in skirts, etc. But this guy ordered this ridiculous pleated skirt that looked hideous and really battered my confidence. The lady who he worked with, and also having an affair with, did not like me one bit. She always treated me like crap. She got someone fired because they smelled funny. The poor girl had an urinary infection, and the smell was due to that. Anyway, the reason I left, I fell very ill with a chest infection, and was signed off work by the doc for a couple of weeks. The boss lady rang me every day asking when I would be in, and started getting really horrible, so I contacted personnel and told them, and started sending my doc's notes to them. When I came back, neither of them asked how I was, and I got hauled into the office and shouted at for not sending them sick notes and not calling in every day. They gave me a really hard time that I had a mini breakdown and was signed off again for a week as the chest infection came back. That was it. I started getting abusive emails, which I forwarded to personnel and arranged a meeting with them for when I got back. Personnel said that I was not to speak to the bosses about anything that had transpired. So the next week I was back and immediately got hauled into the director's office, whereupon they shouted at me for going to personnel and belittling me to the point of tears when they gave me the roughest sandpaper type tissues to clean my face with. She was known to do this to other people as well. I left the office and went to do the banking, walked straight to head office and into personnel, handed them the banking money and told them I could not go back. It created an absolute storm. Turns out I was not the only one with problems like this with them. I heard about 3 months later that one was fired, and it was suggested to the other that they should resign, and they did. Was a very satisfying moment for me. Oh, and I poached a couple of their graphic designers for the new company I went to work for. I worked at a furniture store for only 3 days. I carried rugs around the place. The boss made me work from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m., carrying rugs up and down stairs, with no lunch break. He kept saying that if we weren't carrying at least 4 rugs at a time, we weren't working hard enough. These were big Persian rugs too. I went home each day with every part of my body aching. I was late for my 4th day because I hardly had the strength to get myself out of bed. I got to work about 4 minutes after my shift was meant to start, and got berated me for not being on time. All I said was, "Fuck this, I'm out," and left. Worked at Journeys briefly for a while. Understand that at Journeys you make shit for pay, but you get commission on your sales of shoes / socks / etc. So the idea is, even though the pay is shit, if you are a good salesman, it's a decent part-time gig. My manager was a girl who was about a year older than me. I think I was around 22 at the time, and she was 23. I came into work for the first 5 to 6 shifts I worked there, and I was sent to the back to a large pallet of shoes and told to put them up on these huge rack ladder storage shelving units that went about 18 feet high. It was a huge job as it all had to be in the right order / color. It was quite a system. So each 4-hour shift I would come in, sort the shoes, and by the time I was done it was time to leave. Well, about the 7th or 8th shift I came in, and she looked at me and was like, "We got 2 pallets today, go ahead and start with that." I blinked and just went to do my job. About 30 minutes later of noticing she had no customers outside and was talking on the phone with her boyfriend, I went out front and asked, "Hey, you mind giving me a hand with this? It's a lot of work." She looked at me and said, "I'm the manager. That's not my job." I just walked in the back, called my buddies and was like, "Be at the bar in 15 minutes. I'm quitting." I walked out front with my coat, put my badge on the counter and was like, "I'm done. Sort your own damn shoes." She looked at me and was like, That has to be done by tonight. You can't just quit." I looked at her, smirked and said, "Then you better get started," and I just did quit. She looked at me and scowled. She says, "You can't just quit this store after going through all the training. Don't you give a shit about your job?" I looked at her and said, "I'm an employee that doesn't give a fuck. That's not my job." Flipped her the bird and walked out. It felt so damn good. FYI, I had a full-time job as an IT admin and took the job just to fill an empty time in my life, so it's not like I needed it. This inspired me to get a crappy part-time job and quit it for the lulz. I was having a shitty time at a shitty company. The company was a call center for a horrible credit card preying on the most desperate people. Real depressing, soul-sucking stuff. After a few months, I dreaded coming into work every day. I was a programmer and relied on way too heavily for menial reporting shit. I was called on the day of my daughter's birth for this stupid shit. My mother-in-law was sick and in the hospital. I took a sick day to be there for my wife. While I was out, they called in an IT consultant to get onto my PC to run some crap that could have waited a day. All IT there was a joke. I was constantly circumventing security to get actual work done and to implement personal preferences. I had a music folder synced with my music folder at home. Rather than talk to me about it, they wiped the drive and did a reinstallation. All my scripts, preferences, and many files I hadn't put on the file server were gone. Even though this was soon after the economy took a dive, I walked out, not even bothering to say goodbye to anyone. I got a job that was better in every way within a week. My only regret is not walking out of that horrible place on the first day. So fun. I am actually quitting a shitty restaurant job today. I'm shocked to see so few servers bitching here. The restaurant I work at is a prime example of where not to work. Essentially, I'm quitting because one of my managers decided to go around to my two larger parties one evening and explain that the gratuity is not mandatory. Even though it says in the menu it will be added to parties of 8 or more. These were tables that had not solicited her help, not asked to see management. No food issues, no problems with their service. One of them left me nothing on a $250 bill. I had to tip out $10 on those sales. 1.5% to 3 people. Fuck that manager. Worst job I ever had was for an animal feed company. Middle of summer during a heat wave, I was handed a broken garden fork and directed to a shipping container full of sawdust. Was told to empty it. No other equipment, no breathing mask. Worked there for a week, and decided my lungs and sanity were more important to me than minimum wage. Marched into the office to tell my boss I quit, and before I had a chance to speak was informed I was being laid off anyway. Good times. Perfect opportunity to say, "You can't fire me because I quit." I used to be a store manager for Blockbuster in the 90s. When I took the store over, it was a total shithole. I was tasked by my district manager to clean the place up ASAP. After a month, I had to fire half the CSRs because they were stealing movies and candy. They used to send some guy from the corporate office, who though he was James Bond, to interrogate people. I felt like I saw him every week for a month or two. Everyone that was left was pretty unmotivated, and the neighborhood wasn't the most pleasant area to be in. Blockbuster used to have these in-store, good-as-cash coupons. They were called Z-Bucks or Whiz-Bucks. I can't remember anymore. I started handing these things out as incentives to employees. If I come in the morning and notice that whoever closed cleaned up the place well, stocked all the candy and sodas, etc., then I'd get those employees some of these coupons with a "Hey, great job last night." Since my store had my boss's office, she'd come in every day and tell me how great things were looking, and I felt pretty damn good about it. When it came time to go through my DM to get more of these in-store cash coupons, she asked why I had run out. I explained I had been giving them out to employees that I thought were doing a great job. She looks me straight in the eye and says, "Oh, Grumpyman, You can't reward people just for doing their damn job. That's not what those coupons are for. My Thomas Peters influenced style of management was crushed, and I quit the job a few weeks later and never went back to retail. TLDR, high-up boss was a dick friend quit. Not mine, but my friend's. We worked games at an amusement park during the summer. Easy job for the most part. But the assistant GM didn't like us leaning or sitting in the games we were working at. My friend's leg had recently gotten hurt and had a doctor's note saying he shouldn't be standing on it all day. Now you would figure that a note from a doctor would be all fine and dandy for allowing your employee to sit. Apparently not. The assistant GM tells my friend to come with him and takes him all the way back to the administrative offices and tells my friend that he wants a one-page apology letter for sitting and a promise that he wouldn't be caught sitting again. We'd put up with this asshole shit over the years. First taking away seats for games that were basically out in the sun all day, then cutting down the amount of time we worked, and many numerous things that pissed us off. That year had been one of the worst with him. So my friend just up and quit. We were tired of his bullshit, and none of us returned there this year. Our section's manager was a total boss though. One of the best people I've had the pleasure of working for. I never understood why a lot of employers are against sitting. I worked at a hardware store for a summer, and there was a strict no-sitting policy. You were expected to be standing on the hard concrete for 8 hours. I feel like I would have done my job a lot better if I was allowed to sit and rest my feet for a bit instead of being pissed off all day because my feet are killing me. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to watch our videos and subscribe to the channel.